Welcome to a new video and an update on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV, because I got the brand new firmware version 64.0.A.5.71, and this improves not only the heat and heat management, so it's not switching to 60 Hz so much, but also the periscope zoom camera. And I can try out the 3.5 and 5 times zoom mode to see if we see any improvements in terms of quality. Okay, it's a bit hard to shoot against the sun here, but you can see there the boat, and let's try it out. Let's go to 85 millimeters. There we go, 3.5 times, and I think it's a bit dark on the viewfinder. Can move around a little bit. Stabilization should compensate pretty good. And now let's go to 125 times. You can see, I think maybe a slightly bit sharper. Let's zoom in a little bit more. Yeah, this is 375 times the maximum. And I think a tiny bit sharper here. Maybe we can get it a bit sharper by, yeah. Now it's completely sharp by manual focusing. We can see this is now a lot sharper, so you can see that if I go to autofocus, it's getting a little less sharp, and if we go to manual focus, so there we go, a bit more sharp. This is autofocus, and this is manual focus, which is a lot more sharp. So if you want to zoom in such high zoom capabilities, do manual focus. It produces a much sharper image. So Sony still has to work on the autofocus here to get this a little bit sharper still. So what about overheating on the Xperia 1 Mark IV? By the way, I'm using the 16mm lens here right now, and you can see some boats in the background crossing there. So very interesting. 60mm usually tends not to overheat so quickly, but I was also doing a test with 24mm, the biggest sensor here, and compared it with the Xperia 1 Mark III, the 1 Mark III stayed cool and there was no overheating sign at all, where this showed the overheating sign. But 2 times I was testing it, and 2 times I could get up to 30 minutes or over 30 minutes recording times with Photo Pro in basic mode for video recording and Video Pro app with some manual settings, just like, for example, I was setting the white balance manually like I did right now. The only difference is with now is that I have now set the stabilization to be turned on. This is why, yeah, stabilization is now turned on, and I'm not sure why, but in between, like the other day, even with this firmware, I was recording just for a few minutes. Stabilization was, I think, turned on. I'm not sure, but also the manual settings set, and it wasn't really that hot. And for some reason it was overheating. It was not only showing me the high temperature warning, but really overheating and then turning off after 7 or 8 minutes roughly, which is a bit of a bummer, I would say. So I still cannot quite figure out what is causing this overheating. It is definitely the camera software and some bug in the camera software for sure, but I'm not so sure what is causing this. What if it's a specific setting that I'm setting up? Is it the stabilization maybe? Is it the focusing system? I was expecting the eye and face autofocus to use a little bit more power, so turning it off helps a lot, and also for product shots it's much nicer, so it's not focusing on your face but on the product itself. But yeah, for this kind of shot here that I'm filming here right now, I think it is fine. If you use the 16mm, maybe it's not overheating so quickly. If you use the 24mm, it can overheat a bit, but I'm not sure why. So stabilization is better, definitely, but is it causing overheating issues? I think it's something else in the camera software itself that is causing this overheating, and I cannot grasp it still. So if you have some clues to why it's overheating, is it randomly overheating for you as well? So sometimes in the same temperature environment you get like the possibility to record over 30 minutes without any issues, just stop it, because who's recording longer than 30 minutes? And another time it's just like after a few minutes just giving you the warning, and yeah, overheating and issues. Let's see, let's check. 16mm, of course, no overheating, no hot warning for anything. 85 millimeters, nothing. Let's go back to 24 millimeters, so I get a bit of a nice background blur here. It's super weird, I have to say. So maybe there's something wrong with the hardware, but I'm not so sure about this. I was checking the temperatures, and yeah, it was normal. Of course, the temperatures get a bit high, 55, 60 degrees, normal for the Xperia device and the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. But nothing that should cause like this high temperature that suddenly kicks in and turns everything else off. So maybe there's something interfering. Is it maybe the signal? I don't know. I could record also in airplane mode to see if it repeats itself. The Wi-Fi, I cannot imagine that's the Wi-Fi or something like this. But turning it off, of course, could help a little bit with heat dissipation. In any way, it is hard to reproduce the overheating issue. If you have the overheating issue, it's very annoying because you cannot record anything anymore. But if you don't have the overheating issue, then everything is working fine for you. So it's a bit of unreliable currently, this Xperia device, which is like a bit big of a bummer. And I'm really thinking of giving Sony one last chance. I heard there was an update coming out that helps again with heat in Asia. If this update will arrive before the end of this month, then I would say, okay, I keep it, test it. If everything is working fine, I keep it as the way it is. But if it isn't, then I'm really thinking about, because it's the last chance for me to send the device back and get my money back, I might think about sending this back, really, and instead getting the Vivo X80 Pro instead, because it's like, I think 100 euros cheaper than this one here. And so with the money back, I could just buy the Vivo instead. Of course, I could do comparisons in a slight way, like comparing the photos that I took with this, which takes wonderful photos, by the way, if it doesn't overheat. But gladly, I never had this issue with overheating during photos with this firmware version. With the previous firmware version, I had this issue. So I think that, yeah, and if it overheats, of course, you don't have autofocus and all the annoyances of a very dim screen. So it's not very good for photography, so gladly they fixed that. I would say, yeah, maybe I will do it. We have to say, write down in the comment section what you think about how long should I keep this. Should I switch and try out the Vivo instead? Would be interesting to know what do you think about this one here. And if you are still waiting also with your purchase of the 1 Mark IV eventually, or you're also thinking about switching or using another phone for this high photography like size T-Star coated lens camera smartphone, very long word now, and I feel like it's getting a bit warm here right now, but I don't think it's overheating. Maybe it's showing me up the warm heat sign. Let's see. Yes, it's showing me the sign that it's like a bit warm, so it's basically high temperature sign, but it's not showing this triangle with super hot, and I turn myself off in a second. So yeah, I'm not sure how long I'm recording here right now, but you can see in sunshine now it's like probably 25 degrees, something like this, 23, 24, same as indoors, but the sun is shining, so probably a bit higher there. It still has this overheating issue, the 1 Mark IV, and I think this is a problem that Sony can only fix by modifying the Linux kernel, the Android kernel, and clocking down the Snapdragon at least 300 megahertz, so it's not constantly running at 1.7 gigahertz, but rather, so most of the cores 1.7 gigahertz, but rather 1.3, 1.4 gigahertz. Slower performance for games and so on, but maybe for games you can turn it off, this mode, but for recording here, or they have to fix the camera software to not have this overheating issue, high temperature issue. What do you think? Write it down in the comment section. That's long enough, I think, for this video. Until the next time, bye.